You're on 94.9. It is 16 minutes past 4, and it's that time of day on a Tuesday afternoon that we'll speak with Creation Ministries International. And again this week we have Dr. Tas Walker from Creation Ministries. Good afternoon, Dr. Tas.
Good afternoon, Mick. It's good to hear your voice. Good to join with you again.
Oh, it's great to have you back again. We love it when you're on. Of course, people can go to creation.com whenever they like just to get their questions answered. There's a little box up the top there. You can type your questions in, and there's literally thousands of pages of info. But we love it when people ask questions while we're on air. And, of course, Dr. Tas can answer them on air. So if you do have any questions at all this afternoon, please text them to us on 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. Tas, I believe this afternoon we're going to be talking about a giant inland sea in Australia.
That's right. It's a giant inland sea, and geologists have given it a name, and it covers the remains of it cover a fair part of Australia today, most basically over eastern Australia. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of interesting things that sea has left in our country, and a lot of people go out looking for things that were in it, and it's very, very profitable for people that find them.
Okay, what sort of things?
Well, one of the things that are found are opals. You find opals in the sediments that were deposited in that sea. Some of these opals are at a place called Lightning Ridge. There's a lot of different places, actually. There's another place called Cooper, which is in South Australia.
Yep.
And there's also opals found in other places in Queensland in these sediments, which were formed in this great sea. And it's given a name, it's a well-known name. The people who are in the know, they know the name of the sea. And you can see the remains of it, or what it's deposited. You can see it over a large part of Australia.
Yes, and I believe it's called the Eromanga Sea. Did I say that right?
The Eromanga Sea is correct. And Eromanga is a small town which is basically about the middle of the sea, about there, sort of to the west of Brisbane, and it's also called the Eromanga Sea. Is what was envisaged was there at this time. Now, of course, the Bible talks about how the whole world was deluged and destroyed, and once there was water over the whole of the world. The whole of the world was buried in water, covered in water, and but nobody really connects this great inland sea with Noah's flood, and there's a reason for that, and it's to do with the way people have labelled it, and that throws everybody off the track. But it's very obvious that it is connected with Noah's flood, because of the various things that you find in the sediments left behind.
I mean, it's interesting that we actually call it the Eromanga Sea. If it was part of Noah's flood, it was just the sea.
That's right. The Eromanga Sea. Because the reason why it's called that is the geologists have gone around and they check all the different rocks they find in different places, and they draw maps of them, and this map shows this big area of sediment which is deposited there, and they give it an age. If you go out to, say, if you go to Richmond, there's a little tin shed of a hospital, of a museum there, not a hospital, of a museum, and you watch a video there, they put it on display, and they say there was a great inland sea 100 million years ago. Uh-huh. And that's why people don't associate it with Noah's flood, because of course Noah's flood occurred about 4,500 years ago, 2,500 years before Christ. Yep. And so there's a big difference between 4,500 years ago and 100 million years ago. So no wonder people don't think that that's the remains of Noah's flood. But there's a lot of features in that inland sea that was there that points very clearly to it.
So they say that was the early Cretaceous period, in these hundreds of millions of years ago. How do they date that?
Well, they can work out the relative order of the rocks. And so, like, if you go to Carnarvon Gorge, which is a gorge that is in this particular inland sea, and you walk through the bottom of the gorge, walking through, there's a creek that goes through there, very nice. You can see the layers of rock in the gorge at the side, and so you can work. It's very easy to see which ones are at the bottom, and which ones are further up, and which ones are right at the top. And so you can easily work out the order of the rocks. And so that was worked out originally in the UK, in England. There's a guy there that did a lot to do with working out the order of the fossils. And you can work out, like, they've got the White Cliffs of Dover. They're very white, and they are sort of some of the last sediments which were deposited in England at that time. And because they're white, they're called chalk. And another word for chalk is sort of it's sort of connected with Cretaceous. That's where the idea of Cretaceous comes from. So Cretaceous, did we mention that? We did mention
Yep.
Cretaceous, didn't we?
Yep.
And so when they find the similar sorts of fossils here in Australia, they think, well, maybe that seems like it's about the same time, the same sorts of fossils. And that's not unreasonable, I mean, we don't know for 100% exactly if it's true, but it looks like it sort of forms a nice sort of pattern. So that's why they call it Cretaceous, and they give the rocks labels: Cretaceous, Jurassic. I don't know if you've heard of Jurassic, have you? I'm just kidding.
That one's famous.
Jurassic Park. Why do they call it Jurassic? Well, it's named after the rocks which are in the Jura Mountains in Germany, and so they find certain fossils in those rocks, and particularly dinosaur remains, and so that's where the idea of Jurassic comes from. And this great inland sea in Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, and Northern Territory, this great inland sea, it deposited rocks which are called, it's got lots of dinosaur remains in them, and so they call them. It's got some Jurassic sediments, which the geologists have labelled them as Jurassic. And then it's got Cretaceous sediments, which are sitting on top of them. And so that's how they label these things. And so that's in this great inland sea, they find lots of remains of dinosaurs, which is fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Dr. Tas, I've got a message that came in. Saying, thanks for the info. Tell me, does a topographic map of Australia demonstrate the recessive stage of the flood? And if so, how can we recognise it?
Well, it does show the recessive stage of the flood, because as the waters came off the continents, they carved the surface flat in many places. So, for example, if you're looking at the Blue Mountains, which is near Sydney, you can see that as you look out from the Echo Point, you look across at the plateau, which is there. You can see the plateaus in the distance, and right in the distance you can see them. Yep. So the top layers were smoothed flat by the waters of Noah's flood when they covered the whole of the area. Mm-hmm. And so that's an example of the topographic effects of the flood on the topography of the continents. And so we find these flat plateaus all around the world. You see them, and if you go out to, say, Carnarvon Gorge, you can see the flat surface right at the top of the gorge there. You can see them there. And so you see these flat surfaces in many places, and that's one example of how the recessive waters of the flood carved the surface flat.
Wow!
There's a lot of examples. Another one is a really strange one, and you can see it, for example, out in Central Australia near Alice Springs. If you go out there, you can see the West MacDonald Ranges that go to the west of Alice Springs, and you drive along the road there, and you can see these like they're ridges. They're probably they're called ranges.
Yep.
And as you drive along there, you can see that there's there are gaps in them where the water flow, it cuts right through the ridges.
Wow.
Which is strange. You think, well, why? How come the river, or how come it flowed through the range and not around the range?
Yeah, kind of sideways.
It cuts through it.
Yep.
Cuts through it, and that's often one of the names of that. It's called a water gap,
Yep.
and you see them everywhere. You see them near. You see them around Queensland. I can't think of any. I think there are some down in New South Wales. The way around the Three Sisters around there, you find some of those gaps have been dammed up for forming water supplies. But it was formed as the waters of Noah's flood. As they were draining off, the waters actually flowed across the top of the range, and as they went down, they continued to cut these gaps down lower and lower. So these water gaps. And I guess the best way to find it would be to go to creation.com and search for something like rivers that cut through ranges or something like that. And there's a lot of examples of them right around the world. Some of them are very deep.
Sounds very
So that's a good
interesting.
question.
Yes, absolutely. Now, look, we've got to go into a little break right now, and we'll come back to Dr. Tas very soon. You're on 94.9. It's 27 minutes past 4. You're on 94.9. It's 22 minutes to 5, and we have Dr. Tas Walker on the line from Creation Ministries International. And we've been talking about, well, lots of interesting stuff, including the inland sea and water gaps we ended up on. And I just got a message through from Bob who said, thanks, Tas. Just Googled images of water gaps in Australia. Interesting. And, of course, another way of finding out more about them is going to the creation.com website. There is information about water gaps there too. Is that right, Dr. Tas?
Yeah, that's right. Lots of information, and it's quite amazing how people have researched these. And when I started out, I didn't know anything much about how geology supported the Bible account of the Noah's flood. But there were people all around the world have been researching all sorts of different stuff, and it's amazing how when you understand it and you see it, you can see it everywhere, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, it brings me to a question. You were talking before about the White Cliffs of Dover and about some sandstone layers up north. And I mean, we have our own sandstone layers here going down to the Hawkesbury River. When you're driving through the freeway cuttings, you can see all the layers. And, of course, out in the middle of Australia, they have all those, well, we have completely different colour. Out in the middle of Australia, you get like layers of red, and they go up and down a long way. And here, well, our sandstone layers are similar colours all the way down. Yeah, you get sort of different sort of size little bits in them, but similar colours. And then, of course, the White Cliffs of Dover, similar colour, top to bottom. Now, if all these mountains are meant to be like millions and millions of years old, why are they different colours? Red in the middle of Australia, grey here, and white at the White Cliffs of Dover. Wouldn't you expect them to be all different colours?
Well, you could expect that, but really what happened is it formed in Noah's flood, and what happened was the crust of the earth moved, and so at different times the flow of the water would pick up different sorts of material. It might pick up some granite in one place. It might pick up some sand in another place. It might pick up, in the case of the White Cliffs of Dover, it was due to the particularly the special all these things in the ocean, big algal blooms, and they were all white. So these algal blooms formed white sediments, white rocks, and so they do cover. They've got quite a great depth about them, a quite height about them. So they're very similar while they're being deposited, and then there'll be a change. And I often think of it as like during Noah's flood, things stayed the same for a while, and then there was a build-up in the weights moving on the crust and the pressure on the crust, and then like a great big movement of the crust, like an earthquake, the whole of the situation changed, and so then different sorts of material started to form, started to be carried in. And so in the case of the the Three Sisters. You can see the sandstone there, which is really interesting, and it goes all the way down. You talked about the freeway.
Yep.
And I think that's fantastic. You drive along there, you have to be careful that you keep your eyes on the road. But you see the layers of sediment, they must be about 3 or 4 meters thick. Yep. As you go down those very, very tall cuttings. Mm-hmm. And that's an indication of how fast the flow of water was. A lot of water came down, and the water probably had a depth of some 20 meters, and it's bringing this sediment down from the north, and it's depositing it in the Sydney area. It would have been underwater there, but it's depositing the sediment at great energy, great thickness, and you can see it as you come down the freeway. It's not just a little layer, a few inches thick, but a monstrous layer, and you can see what the like little lines in them, like sand dunes, like as if it's a sand dune, yes, which indicate that the water was flowing along very rapidly. And there's one guy, Patrick Connigan, he's a geologist, who wrote papers about the Sydney Basin, and he understood that it had to form very quickly, and he was wondering how it could form quickly, and he came up with a hypothesis about it. But it's very consistent with Noah's flood, where the water came down. It was 20 kilometers across, 20 meters deep, bringing all this sediment down and depositing it in the Sydney area. And so that's just another example of the enormous catastrophe of Noah's flood, which is obvious when you know what to look for.
Yes. Yes, I know one of the Creation Ministries guys, a geomorphologist, was telling us that even in the largest floods these days, you're lucky to get a 10 centimetre deposit from the flood.
That's right.
Whereas we see, meters upon meters, and you just think, okay, well, that was a bigger flood.
That was a bigger flood. That's exactly right. And so the evidence is there. I knew a geologist once who he was trained in the normal geological schools, and he was talking, and he says, I don't see any evidence for Noah's flood. I don't see any evidence for it. Uh-huh. And then later on he said, I didn't see any evidence, but now that I know what to look for, I see it everywhere. That's what we do at creation.com. We put we put up information so that people can figure it out for themselves. We put up a geological transformation tool so people can find out where the sediments were laid. Was it as the waters of Noah's flood were rising, or was it as they were falling, or was it after the flood, or what?
Yes.
It's a very helpful tool, a transformation tool, geologic transformation. And so anywhere you go in the world, you can look up what the mainstream geologists say, and you just look at it, and you can see where it actually occurred in biblical history, which is quite amazing.
Absolutely. Now, with this inland sea, there must have been, it's obviously a low point in the land. There must be like a bunch of dinosaurs out there, is there?
Well, there is. There's a lot of dinosaurs. Well, actually, they find animals which live in the ocean, and there's a number of plesiosaurs which have been discovered, and they also find animals which live on the land. So you've got a catastrophe which affected the ocean and affected the land, and of course that fits with what the Bible says. It talks about Noah's flood, how the water came up on the land, and it continued to rise, and it says that everything that had the breath of life in it perished. And so you see that evidence, like at Richmond, they discovered a plesiosaur. It was 4 meters long, lying on its back, and the farmer discovered the snout of this plesiosaur sticking out of the ground, and they contacted the museum, and they came up to two paleontologists, and they started digging it out, and they said there must have been a catastrophe here because it was so well preserved. I mean, it wasn't all sort of bones lying everywhere as if it had been eaten by other fish and rotted away. Like, kangaroo on the side of the road.
Yep.
But it was incredibly well preserved, and they call that articulated. It was like all connected together.
Wow.
And so it's a very good one. So they discovered this plesiosaur. They found another one, a chronosaur, and in fact that was I think there's some people from a Japanese museum bought that, and it's on display in Japan.
Okay.
And there's a little tin shed museum up at Richmond, quite a nice little place. They call it Chronosaur Corner. And so you can go and they can see all sorts of things there, which is good. But that's not all. That's just a couple of, then you've got just down the road a little bit, maybe 50 kilometres or something like that, maybe a bit more. You've got Muttaburra, where a farmer discovered dinosaur remains.
Yep.
And his name was Doug Langdon. And he sort of spent his life now, he's given up farming. He spends his life playing around with dinosaurs and dinosaur museums and dinosaur displays. And so this fossil, they called it Muttaburrasaurus langdoni. And it's on display in the museum in Queensland, in Brisbane.
Yep.
And it's also got another replica of it at Muttaburra. And so that's very interesting. I just had some friends go out and looked around central Queensland at all these dinosaur places, and they had a great time. They took articles that I'd written and took this geological transformation tool and piece of paper, and they got into some great conversations with the people there, which is very interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Well, it is definitely very interesting learning all about the inland of Australia and how there used to be an ocean and how the layers form. And I assume for a dinosaur to be preserved upright the way you were saying, it must have been literally packed in a massive amount of mud to hold it up, one, and two, to cover it so as the fish didn't eat it.
Yeah, and not just the fish not eating it. It has to be covered so that as it rots, it's a bit gruesome, but they fill up with gas, and so they would just pop out if it didn't have, and it would float, and it would be eaten.
Wow.
So it had to be covered by half a metre or a metre of sediment, and so that's why these paleontologists said, there must have been a bit of a catastrophe here. But they won't say it's Noah's flood. Do you know why they won't say it? Because they wouldn't get their funding.
Yes.
They wouldn't get their funding from these places, and if they mention Noah's flood, they're likely to get cancelled. So there's a real, how would you say, censorship that goes on. But of course, people that go and look, people from the public, they can say things which perhaps the people that are employed can't say.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, that is very interesting. Well, Dr. Tas, another awesome week. I've really enjoyed it. And I've got to thank you again, 2 weeks in a row. Fantastic stuff. Thank you, Dr. Tas.
Oh, good on you. Good on you, Mike. It's really good. And we'll catch you again. I always enjoy having a chat to you.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to our next time already.